You're listening to The Purple Mystic, a podcast for the modern witch, with your host, Natalie Sedgwick. Good morning, broom riders. Welcome back to the Purple Mystic podcast. I am Natalie, your host, and today we are going to be talking about the Sabbat of Samhain. Now, Samhain has a few different pronunciations depending on which part of Europe you are from or how you want to pronounce it, which path you follow. So I'm going to call it Samhain. It is not Samhain, however, and I know that pronunciation is becoming very popular. If you want to know why it is important to pronounce this Sabbat correctly as either Samhain, Samhain, or Samhain, then I suggest you check out Morgan Daimler's TikTok. She is your go-to source for all things Fae. She's very well researched. She does a wonderful job of dispelling some of the very bizarre ideas that come up now and then dealing with the Fae. And she's very learned on the Irish language, really. I've been very impressed with how well she's been able to incorporate that language because it's not easy. But it is pronounced slightly differently between Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. However, it is not Samhain. Part of the reason that is important is because of what it means in Gaelic. Samhain means summer's end, and this is the Sabbath that was most important for the holiday. I guess I would say it wasn't a Sabbath to the ancient Celts, but it was a time when the ancient Celts definitely were revering a lot of different things. It was the final of the three major harvest festivals. It was considered the time when the earth was going dormant, not dead, but dormant. However, in that case, a lot of the plants do die back and go into sort of a stasis. They saw this as a time when the veil between the physical world and the spiritual world thinned, which gave us a better opportunity to connect with our ancestors. And so ancestor reverence or worship, as some people will consider it, was very important. But when that veil thins, not only do the good spirits get through, the not so nice spirits might get through too. Hence some of those traditions of wearing costumes or masks to throw those off, because they believed that your family members, your ancestors, would always know you. So it was a way to trick bad spirits, and that's just one of the things that kind of led to what is considered the modern day trick-or-treat sort of holiday of Halloween. I'm not here to talk about Halloween. I'm here to talk about Samhain as a Sabbath and how I celebrate that. So for me, it is definitely a time to kind of take stock of my year. For us as witches, this is the beginning of the new year for us. It is a time when everything has gone dormant but not dead. And again, what I mean by that is when you look at it from an earth perspective, the earth never dies. It goes dormant, right? Your grass comes back in the spring because it hasn't truly died. It is dormant and it is resting. So I take this as a time of rest from the year. I will take stock of what I was able to reap from the seeds that I sowed in the spring and in the fall of the previous year. And I kind of match that up. I do a lot of journaling during this time, during the month of October, from really between the time of the autumnal equinox and Samhain. I will do a lot of journaling and kind of taking stock of where am I? Am I where I want to be? If not, why haven't I gotten where I want to be? It is a time when I will really give a lot of thanks to my goddess and the God that I work with my family members, with my ancestors, for all of the support that I have received and the things that I have received through the year, I mean. So it's a really good time for reflection. And that's one of the things that I love to do during season for me. And that is to look at where am I, where have I been, and where am I going? Now, for those of you who are herbalists or gardeners, you know that there are many seeds that have to be cold stratified. So there are certain plants, such as bulb plants, that get planted in the fall. There are certain seeds that may lie dormant for years because they haven't been stratified. And what that is that is the process. They have kind of an internal timer that tells them when winter is over. So, as a gardener, what we will do is do a process called cold stratification. And what we do is we take those seeds, we put them in like a damp paper towel, put them in ice cube trays, and stick them in the freezer for a couple of weeks. Then, when it is time to plant, we'll pull those seeds out and we'll start the germination process. Because these plants, these particular seeds, may lie dormant under the earth for sometimes years, waiting for the right conditions to come out. So it's possible, if you're not seeing some of those seeds, is that you're not stratifying your seeds, right? And that goes for our spiritual selves as well. So Samhain is a time when I look at that and I go, okay, is this idea or this goal going to take more work than just, putting it out there, right? What do I need to do to stratify the seed to allow it to germinate and grow in the spring? So this is a good time for that type of reflection. Some other ways in which I personally celebrate the Sabbath is that following the autumnal equinox and leading up to Samhain, for me, the season of Samhain begins on Samhain and continues until Yule. So at this point in time, I still consider this part of the Mabon season, but it's leading into that Samhain time. So I will begin to prepare my home to welcome my ancestors. And what I do with that, we have a cabinet full of pictures of our family. And some of them are living, some of them have passed. I may include photos of chosen family or close friends who are no longer with us that I have a special place for. So what I will do is I have like a bar that separates my kitchen from my living space. It's where I dry my herbs because I can hang them there and it's well ventilated. But I will take that space and I will make it into kind of a makeshift ancestor altar. So that is where I will take out the pictures of my chosen family as well as my birth family who are no longer with us. And I will put those pictures there and I will put out some flowers or fruits or maybe like little miniature bottles of alcohol if that was something that they liked as an offering to those family members and a welcome to them to come into my home. Another thing that I like to do at this time is just kind of do a lot of meditations related to connecting to my ancestors. Some of that is part of my ovate training. As a member of the OBOD, we do work with some ancestral work in that, and that so some of those meditations are things that are privy to that. But you can find a lot of really good ancestral meditations online, and this is a good time to kind of sit down and do that. I will also do a lot of journaling during this time, once again related to what seeds have I sown, what do I want for next year, what are my goals for myself. I will take time to physically write down a thank you to my ancestors for supporting me and ask their blessing in the coming year for all of those things that I want for the next year to bring. This is a time when I will ask for their help. Also, I feel that this is a time when we are particularly able to receive blessings from our ancestors, that we can get advice for areas in which we're needing help. And so I will reach out to them for that. That is something that I will do this time of year also. In terms of preparing for the actual Sabbath of Samhain, I do a lot of things during this time. I'm mentally preparing myself, I'm physically preparing myself. I will often fast leading up to Samhain, and the day of Samhain, I will fast. But I also do things like prepare certain foods. Now, not everybody does this, not everybody likes to cook or bake, but for me, this heralds the beginning of the baking season. My favorite Sabbats are Beltane or Beltane, Samhain, and Yule. So between now and Yule, I'm doing a lot of baking. Usually, this is the time when you can bake in Texas without baking literally because it's so flippin' hot. However, we are having an unusually hot and dry October, so I haven't started actually baking yet. But one of the things that I love to make for Samhain are oat cakes, and those are very easy to do. So I'm just going to run through the process of that for those of you that may be interested. Basically, I have 4 oak trees in my yard. There are different species of oaks, and I think all 4 of mine are of 2 different species. I think I have 2 of each type of oak tree, or 3 of one species and 1 of another. There is one species of oak tree which you can eat the acorns straight off the tree. However, I don't know which species of oak that is. So if anybody knows, please let me know because I've been having a really difficult time finding out which species that is. In the case of my trees are very prolific fruit bearers. And I hate wasting, and I hate wasting the fruit that comes from our trees. A lot of people don't realize that acorns are indeed edible, but they do have to be prepared in most instances. So, in the case of like red oak and the other oaks that we have here, a lot of live oaks, those acorns need to be gone through a process called leaching. Acorns are very high in tannins. Tannins are things that are a chemical. It's very astringent, so it's very drying. And tannin, you may know from the term tanning a hide, because the tannins from those plants were used to prepare hides for clothing or leather or what have you. So what I do to prepare my acorns is I will gather as many of them as I can, or about as much as I think I need. And you put them in a big pot and you fill that pot with water and you boil it. And you will dump out the water. The water will turn very brown. You will dump out the water. I like to preserve some of my water because I actually use it in a facial toner. So I'll reserve some of the water, but you want to keep refilling the water and boiling the acorns basically until the water runs clear. Once the water runs clear, it is now your acorns are now leached. So then what I will do is allow them to dry by laying them single layer on like a large cookie sheet or a drying basket or something like that. I will allow the acorns to dry, kind of running my hands over them to turn them over, or as Juliet Blankenspore calls it, sloofing. I will sloof my acorns until they're nice and dry. Then you crack them open and you can eat the nut. But what I do is I crush the nuts and make a flour. Then I will mix the flour with a little bit of oil, not a lot of oil, but also some honey to sweeten it a little bit. And I will make little flat cakes and I will bake them. And I use these during my Sabbath ritual for my cakes and ale section of the ritual, but also as an offering to both the Fae and to my ancestors. My heritage is mostly Irish, Scottish, and Welsh. So I have a lot of the Celtic background in my heritage. I also have a little bit of Dutch and a little bit of Native American and a little bit of French, but mostly Celtic. So that's the side that I align with the most. And so that's where my path goes in terms of my practice. So I will take these cakes and I will offer them to the Fae as an offering and to my ancestors. I will also sometimes take them out to some of the local cemeteries. I have a cemetery right behind my office, and I have kind of adopted that. It's a family cemetery. There's actually 3 different families that are buried there, but those 3 families farmed the land in the area where my office now stands. So I will go and make offerings to them as well and ask for their guidance on things. So that's something that you can do as well. You can take it as an offering to the graveyard, especially if you plan on collecting grave dirt, which I like to do this time of year because again, that veil is very thin. That's another thing that I will do. This is the time in which I compound my black salts and I will collect my grave dirt. You can collect grave dirt any time of the year, but this is a time that I think is really potent for that. So this is the time in which I will go and do that. So I like to take an offering. Anytime you take, you should give an offering or a thanks, and you should always ask permission. So this is the time in which I do that, and I will take some of my oat cakes out there and offer them. I make like small cookies because most of the people buried in that cemetery are children, 14 and younger. So I will take out some of those oat cakes and give it as like a little, I'll make oat cookies and say thank you and all of that stuff. So that is one of the things that I like to do. Another thing that I like to do this time of the year is go out to that grave and clean those gravestones. Some of them are very, very worn. And if you're planning on going to a local cemetery and cleaning the graves, you might want to make sure that you clear that with your city or your local government or with whoever is caring for that cemetery, because some cemeteries have rules about that, things that you're not supposed to use or things you're not supposed to do, or they don't want them cleaned because they want them to wear as they are naturally. However, this particular cemetery being family owned, the property is actually owned by another business that's kind of behind ours. They've given me permission to do whatever the heck I want. So I go out there and clean the graves and make offerings to them at this time as well. So visiting your family who has passed on, this is a good time to do that. Cleaning their graves and making offerings to them is a good time to do that. As I was mentioning earlier, I will make like a makeshift altar on my bar for family members by putting pictures of family that have passed on with their offerings. I think I mentioned that. This is also a good time for me to really delve into some of my deeper learning. I go back now and kind of revisit things that I've already studied through the year just to kind of refresh myself on them. And I find that this is a really, really good time for that. For me personally, this is a very potent time, like a pregnant time for developing new things, new ideas, planting some bulbs, I guess would be a good way to put it. I also do a lot of writing for my books, my courses. I'm in the process of developing a lot of different things, and this is a good time for that as well. When it comes to my actual Samhain ritual, I will tell you that I practice primarily solitarily, and I don't generally, honestly, like to do Sabbat rituals with others. For me, it's a very personal time. It's a time when I really connect deeply with my deity and with my spirits and ancestors and guides. And so for me, I don't like the distraction of others in my ritual, if that makes sense to anybody besides me. And I guess it doesn't matter if it makes sense to anybody besides me because it's my thing. I'm not denying that there's something to be said for celebrating a major Sabbath with a group because it does raise a different type of energy. So if I'm invited to a Sabbath ritual somewhere, I will go and participate in that ritual. But when it comes to the day of and my personal ritual, I will always do that solo. And I will decorate my altar with a lot of various different things. I put pictures of my ancestors. I place out skulls and skull candles because that helps me to know. It kind of calls to mind a little ditty that my dad's mother had. She had a full human skeleton hanging in her closet. I don't know where she got the skeleton from. Never bothered to ask, but it was a real skeleton. And she had a sign on this skeleton that said, "What you are now, I once was. What I am now, you will one day be." And I find that this is a really good time for recalling those words and reflecting on their meaning that we are all going in one direction, right? That this life is transient and temporary, and recalling that what we sow we reap. So I really like to take those words to heart at this time and think about who I am as a person and who I want to be and try to reach for my higher self. I'll do a lot of personal reflection meditation, and just try to kind of come to grips with my own humanity and my own mortality. So skulls kind of help me to recall that, and they bring that to mind for me. But it's also the symbolism of the fact that we live within not one dimension, but really, I think physics has identified 10 to 12 dimensions. We exist within all of that. So for us, that magical liminal space is created within the mind, right? So fourth dimension and higher, the dimension of mind to the dimension of soul is connected through the brain, through the skull. And so skulls for me are very symbolic of that connection between the physical and spiritual world. So I like to have a lot of that type of imagery. And a lot of people will sit there and go, oh, it's so macabre. To me, it is not macabre. And once I explain it that way, they're like, oh, I never thought of it that way. And it's no longer macabre for them, right? I mean, death is a part of life, it's a part of that cycle. And knowing that we are going to face our own mortality at some point really drives that home for me. So I like to have that type of reminder on my altar. I will often place flowers that bloom this time of year because there are flowers that bloom this time of year, or other plants which connect me with this time. So I will put lots of gourds and things like that, pumpkins, other gourds, squash, all of those fall fruits and winter fruits. I will place those on my altar, either real ones or plastic reproductions, so they don't go bad. If I plan to leave the altar out for a while, or if I'm preparing it way in advance, I'll do that. But on my actual Sabbath altar, I like to have those things because those things remind me that life continues and that we are given fruits throughout the year, not just in the spring or in the summer or at the time of harvest. It's throughout the year. We can store those things and use them later in the year, but there are things that are available to us if we only know where to look. So that serves as a good reminder for that. I will place out pictures of family members and things like bones and that type of thing that I use. A lot of feathers in my practice. So I like to decorate my altar with those things. I do full ritual. Um, and it's just one of those times in which I feel I can really dig deep down within myself. So, baking cakes, making flowers to use later in the year, and by flowers I mean like baking flour. As I mentioned, my oak flour I like to make. It's a good time for that because this is the time when the acorns are ripening and it's really good. Apples, I will use a lot of apples in magic because apples really are a fall fruit. So this is a time when I choose to do a lot of love magic, not just romantic love, but cultivating friendship spells to kind of work towards that. And I'll utilize apples a lot in that. Uh, Pomegranates because of Persephone and her entering into the netherworld at this time. I will use pomegranates. They're very symbolic to me. And for Samhain, that seems like just the perfect thing, right? Going dormant, going into that dark period, going into the netherworld and reaching deep for those who have gone before us. I love to write poetry and sing songs for this time. Lisa Teal has a wonderful album called Seasons, I think it's called. Fantastic. I use her music in my ritual that I do because I love her reverence for the different seasons. And she has an opening and closing song, which I like as well. I will sit down and do some other types of cleansing magic at this time as well, using my cinnamon brooms to kind of clear my home. This is a time when I will do a home blessing. I typically do home clearings and home blessings in the spring and then again in the fall, sometime between Mabon and Samhain. But this is not just a cleansing time, this is a time for opening also. So I will open my home to my ancestors and bade them welcome, and any friendly spirits who wish to come in and impart their wisdom, because not everybody may be related to you. If you have teachers with whom you had a great relationship or respect and they've passed on, sometimes they will come through. I do a lot of divination during this time as well. So this is a time when I will do a lot of my scrying work. I do tarot through the year, but this for me is a time when I will sit down with my crystal and do a lot of crystal scrying. I have a very large crystal ball and I call her Lucille. I will make sure that Lucille is cleaned up and I will sit with Lucille and do some real deep scrying in that regard, trying to get an actual vision for where I want to be or what I need to do to get where I need to be, how to come through for my family, and that sort of thing. So, this is a really good time for divinatory work as well because we're very connected during this time. So take those ideas with you and tell me some things that you do. I would love to get emails or feedback. You can find me on YouTube at Purple Broom Apothecary Presents. I'm also on TikTok and Instagram, so look me up at the Purple Broom Apothecary. I have my Facebook page. You can reach out to me there, but I would love to get a Samhain discussion going and share some ideas because I'm always looking for new ways to infuse life, so to speak, into this period of dormancy within the year and finding ways to connect with you, my listeners, with the witchy community, and with our ancestors. So I love to hear everybody's ideas on how they celebrate this time of year and so feel free to reach out to me. Let's start a discussion group and see if we can't come up with some great ideas to share with one another. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope that you all have a blessed Samhain. Blessed be.